Welcome to Real Time Review. This is a show tackling the latest movie releases out in cinemas now. My name is Jesse Nussman. I'm here with fellow Atlanta film critic Jason Evans. Jason, welcome. We have a very jam-packed first episode. We're talking about two of probably the biggest blockbusters of the summer. In one corner, Greta Gerwig's Barbie, this pop color extravaganza, feminist satire, and in the other corner we have Oppenheimer, Christopher Nolan's
history lesson.
Right.
Literally a history lesson.
Complex, very dense movie about the formation of the atom bomb. Two movies that it seems like on paper could not be like further different, but I think actually have some interesting kind of parallels and similarities to them. In some case, I think these are both movies that on paper they seem very kind of like generic and simple, one seeming like your typical kind of prestige Hollywood biopic set during a period of American history, the other one being this piece of corporate brand IP. But what you have with both of them is these two very idiosyncratic films with kind of unique artists behind the scenes, kind of applying their own vision and own craft to the material. So I'm curious, what do you think we should talk about Barbie first? I mean, it's kind of the biggest hit at the box office right now.
I'll tell you that personally, I think the more fascinating story at the moment is the two of them together.
Yeah.
Is this Barbenheimer phenomenon, because there's no place that I have been the past 4 or 5 days where when I start talking to people and they hear that I'm a film critic and we start talking about movies, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, have you seen Barbie? Have you seen Oppenheimer? Have you seen both of them? The way they're connected, look, I've been involved in watching movies and doing movie reviews for way too many years, more than 30 years. I've never, I mean it, I've never seen two completely disparate films like this. You mentioned Barbie's in color, half of Oppenheimer's in black and white. They could not be, so more different on the surface, and yet they're so completely linked. Everyone I know who's seen one and hasn't seen the other says they're going to see the other. It's a phenomenon unlike anything we've seen before, I think. And to me, that's almost more interesting than your and my review and our opinions. Valid and interesting, and I'm a critic and I love giving people my opinion, but the amazing marketing thing, the happenstance that connected these two films and has created one of the biggest movie weekends in Hollywood history, the biggest movie weekend far and away post-pandemic that we've ever seen. It's amazing to me. And people say to me, how'd they do it? And I'm like, if I could tell you how they did it, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be sitting in Hollywood being paid big money because no one in Hollywood can figure out how this happened. They're just thrilled that it did.
Well, let's talk about the movies themselves. Let's talk about Oppenheimer. I think probably my favorite film of the year thus far. I'll admit something a little bit embarrassing. I'm a bit of a Christopher Nolan skeptic at times.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I love plenty of his movies, but every now and then I feel like his sort of artistic ambitions, particularly the way he likes to create these sort of puzzle box structures in his films, can sometimes get in the way of the material.
I will freely admit I wasn't a fan of Tenet, and I think Dunkirk was a little excessive as well.
Well,
so
it's interesting.
He's been on a downturn for me.
I think his structure really works for historical material like Dunkirk, like Oppenheimer. I kind of mentioned, Oppenheimer on paper could be this very straightforward Hollywood biopic about this sort of troubled genius, and it just goes from A to B to C. But I feel like the way that Nolan has sort of established this sort of nesting doll structure with these 3 different timelines that are kind of stacked on top of each other, it allows for him to sort of mirror and contradict different aspects of those plot lines and really bring out a lot of the complexities in this very pivotal moment in world history. And you get a sense of nuance in this movie that I don't feel like, I'm someone who typically doesn't like Hollywood biopics, so I feel like the complexities that Nolan is adding here sort of further deepens it and makes it into something that is a bit more richer and a bit more just holding in the complexities of history in a way that most other movies like this probably wouldn't.
It's a challenging film, and I'll tell you that when I walked out of it, I immediately thought to myself, wow, I loved that. That was remarkable filmmaking, remarkable storytelling, and some sublime acting. I mean, like the number of people that you could say, oh, that guy gave a performance worthy of an Academy Award nomination is numerous in this film. But with all those things said, I was terrified as I walked out that I saw it with a number of friends, And I was afraid that we were going to walk out and they were going to be like, that was long, that was a little, you know, that people wouldn't be as into it as I am. And that often happens as a film critic. We see that kind of thing all the time where we see an art that maybe other people are like, I want to be entertained, not art. And I've been delighted at the reaction that I've gotten from virtually every person I've spoken to about this film, that yes, they acknowledge that there is tremendous art happening here, but they are also entertained, that they're drawn into the story of this complex and hugely important figure, of this amazing moment in time and the effort that it took to accomplish something that, you know, we can debate whether it was ultimately good or bad, but it's a fascinating and important story. I say to people all the time, I'm like, this is an important film. I feel like lots of time when I say that, people are like, I don't know if I want to go see an important film. But what we're seeing is that people who are seeing it agree it's important, agree that it's complex and challenging, but they love it also. And that's a testament to Christopher Nolan's filmmaking.
Well, and I don't know about you, I'm someone who kind of enjoys when a movie sort of bombards your senses and enjoys sort of the aspect of this movie that at times...
One of the things I said about it was, I said that, talking about bombarding your senses, I said the light and the sound almost are a cast member. That like there's so much use of light and sound in this film that they might as well, you know, the Academy Award nominations, I guarantee the technical awards, this film's getting nominated for all of them.
Oh yeah, and I mean just the way that Nolan has this movie edited and the way he's cutting between these three different time periods to sort of, and different perspectives of different characters. I mean, I was comparing this a lot to The Social Network over the weekend, and that it's kind of...
I've heard that comparison a few times, yeah.
You're seeing the invention of this thing that's going to sort of change our modern world, but you're seeing it in kind of this courtroom hearing, essentially. I mean, in the movie they make a point to mention, like, it's not a courtroom hearing, but
it might as well be.
It might as well
There's
be.
a prosecutor there questioning witnesses.
There's a prosecutor there. But, you know, that using that as a way to then people can come onto the stand and sort of give their perspective of events, and then you get these flashback sequences that sort of allow you to get kind of like a second bit of opinion about like what you're seeing in a different perspective about the events that are sort of leading up to it. And even I would say, like, you know, there's a whole sort of plot line with Robert Downey Jr. in this movie.
Right, that's the third timeline here, yeah.
Right, which I will admit, and I've talked to several other people since it came out, of finding that strand of the movie a bit hard to follow, but then I think it really comes into place in sort of the last third of the movie, of you sort of really understand, okay, what is this third sort of trial that's going on that seems to only very lightly have to do with Oppenheimer, but has to do with this other guy that's going to get like an appointment in the White House or something like that, and it seems kind of unrelated.
It's a cabinet position, yeah.
Right. And I think the way that sort of like this movie sort of rewards your patience, and even if you're a little sort of like overwhelmed by the just cacophony of sound and images and just sort of jargon that Nolan is throwing at you, it does have these moments where it sort of like takes a step back to, I think, let you as an audience understand, okay, I don't understand the science or the political ramifications of what's going on here, but I understand the stakes. I understand what these two people arguing about, what their positions are and where they fit on either side of this sort of ideological line. And I think that makes for something that feels like you feel the intelligence of the filmmakers and the people involved in the movie, and there's sort of a thrill in kind of trying to keep up with it, because it's a 3-hour movie that's constantly sort of charging forward.
Yeah, I feel like the three timelines, and I want to be clear, there may be people watching who haven't seen this.
Right.
You're able to follow what's happening in each timeline. It's not you know, as jumpy as maybe we're making it sound, but the three timelines to me are interesting portions of Robert Oppenheimer's morality and his character. The first timeline, the main timeline, is assembling the scientists and building the first atom bomb. One of the most important moments in scientific history. The second timeline is the United States government and people who, really it's the military-industrial complex, who are critical of Robert Oppenheimer questioning this invention. And then the last timeline is sort of the morality of whether what Oppenheimer did was good or bad, and judging him to some extent. Even though you're right, that timeline is almost exclusively, that's the only timeline that Oppenheimer really isn't in.
Right.
It's all Robert Downey Jr.'s character. But still, it's the shadow of what Oppenheimer accomplished and what the scientific world thinks about him as a result that is the primary driving force of that timeline. And I think it's really interesting that Nolan chose to tell the story this way, And again, to me, each of those are sort of very well delineated. He also, by the way, uses different film stock and different color palettes in each one of them to help as a signpost for, okay, here's where you are in each one of these different places. It's a fascinating way of dissecting this hugely important character and letting us as an audience come to some of our own judgments about what he did, because on the one hand, I mean, and this is not getting into the film, this is just getting into history. On the one hand, Robert Oppenheimer and the people he worked with gave mankind the key to our own destruction. On the other hand, if you think about the 30 years prior to them inventing the dropping of the bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the world was at war twice. We had World War I and World War II. And we're talking about major conflicts between huge military powers. In the 80 years since the bomb was dropped, that has not happened at all. Not a single time have we seen the world's major powers on the same battlefield fighting each other. And maybe that's because of the bomb, maybe it's not. I think it probably is. So there's this whole moral question about, did Oppenheimer do something right or wrong? And by the way, Christopher Nolan doesn't have an answer to that. He wants you to think about the answer to that.
That's something I really love about the movie, and I think, bringing up the editing style and kind of some of the stuff that you're talking about. Another movie that's made me think about a lot is JFK, the Oliver Stone movie, in sort of the way that Stone sort of uses the JFK assassination as this kind of like loss of innocence for the country and sort of this prism in order to view all of 20th century American history through. That's kind of what Nolan is doing here as well.
Yeah, although it's not nearly as conspiracy. I mean,
right.
I love JFK. It's a really fascinating movie. Oliver Stone's an interesting guy. But yeah, there's a lot of it that is just like Oliver Stone throwing whatever he can at the wall. This is Christopher Nolan is more disciplined.
Right. But both movies also, I think, share this kind of disdain and sort of cynical view of like the real evil out in the world is sort of government bureaucracy. And in many ways, I think the arc of this movie is kind of like brilliant people who come together to make this thing, and then sort of their own naivety as like the maturity of the world around them to sort of understand the kind of responsibility of like what they've created.
Yeah, and this all sounds so heavy. I hate that. I hate that our conversation has gone here.
It's okay. We'll move into a lot.
Right. I hate that our conversation has gone here because people who haven't seen Oppenheimer and people who have seen it will probably recognize this as well. It is a film that is very propulsive. It is not I don't think it's a super heavy film. The half hour leading up to the Trinity test, the test of the very first atomic bomb, is as good an action movie as you'll see without any real action happening. Right. I felt my heart pounding for those entire 30 minutes. There were a couple times I was like, okay, take a second, take a breath, because you're so engaged by what's happening that you forget to breathe.
Right.
And I think the genius of this, the reason this film will show up on every critic's top 10 list at the end of the year, the reason it is a strong awards contender, even though we haven't seen anything that's going to come later in the year.
And we may not.
Yeah, right, exactly. Thank you, SAG Strike, is that this film does more than just tell us a complicated and challenging story. It entertains at the same time.
Well, speaking of complicated, challenging stories, maybe we should talk about Barbie now, which is a movie as much as it is this bright, candy-colored comedy, and has these wonderful comic performances from Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling at the center.
Boy, Gosling is amazing in this film.
Anything Ryan Gosling did in this movie made me laugh so hard throughout the entire movie. But it's also trying to be an issues movie in some sense, and is trying to say a lot about the role of men and women in society, about the way like patriarchy kind of controls
I can't imagine
world.
If you're someone who, and I don't want to get too political, if you're someone who is very worried about how woke the world is, whatever that means, this movie would make your head explode. I'm absolutely convinced that there are people who go to see this movie and walk out and say, well, they curse a little bit. I won't curse here,
Right.
but they curse at Hollywood trying to impart its values on the rest of the country. On the other hand, as someone who agrees with most of those values, I found it absolutely delightful.
I found myself like very impressed. I'm sort of conflicted at a certain point. I think as a sort of like comedy movie going experience, it is delightfully fun from like start to finish. Part of where I kind of brush up against it is sort of at what point does sort of Greta Gerwig's artistic ambition ends, and sort of the corporate branding by the Mattel company who owned Barbie began. And that's something I don't necessarily have an answer for, but in the sense of like, you know, it is impressive that she got to do this very transgressive comedy within the sort of shell of this piece of IP property. But then also as the movie goes on, and especially as the movie sort of brings the Mattel Corporation into the movie as characters, I don't think that's spoiler at all. I think that's in the trailer. And as it kind of tackles with the idea of what happens when corporations want to put on the face of having like progressive ideals in order to sort of sell a product, but maybe don't have those ideals behind closed doors. And I don't know, it just sort of made me think at a certain point, like, is this Greta Gerwig got away with this like really cool transgressive thing inside of the Easter egg shell of, or inside the Trojan horse of a Barbie movie, or is this a very sly piece of marketing by the Mattel Corporation and saying like, we're gonna do the kind of hip, like we're a little bit self-knowing kind of Barbie movie, but really at the end of the day, it's a celebration of Barbie and we want to sell you more Barbies.
Yeah, and by the way, I think the answer to that is yes.
Mm-hmm. It's yes to everything.
Right, exactly. It's a little bit of both. I think that Mattel was willing to go along with whatever Greta Gerwig wanted to do because they recognized that the script that she and her partner Noah Baumbach had put together was going to be very funny, was going to be very successful with audiences. And if you're skewering Mattel at the same time as you're selling a whole lot of Barbie dolls, because I bet they're going to sell a whole lot of Barbie dolls. Yeah, that Mattel's like, okay, that's good with us. The irony, by the way, to me is, my main criticism of the film is that it felt a little long. Mm-hmm. It's 2 hours, maybe even a little bit more than 2 hours. I think that 15, 20 minutes could have easily come out of it. And the 15 to 20 minutes that I would have taken out, by the way, I hate it when people go, oh, it's too long. And then I say, okay, well, what would you take out? And they go, oh, I don't know. Yeah. I can tell you exactly what I would have taken out. Will Ferrell plays the CEO of Mattel. Mm-hmm. And his side plot about him and all the other Mattel executives following Barbie around, and they eventually go to Barbie Land. Again, I don't think that's a big spoiler. I think if you excised all of that from the film, it wouldn't change Barbie and her journey. It wouldn't change Ken and his journey. And it would tighten up the movie. And frankly, I didn't laugh. Like, Will Ferrell's usually reliable. Mm-hmm. I didn't find his character at all funny. I thought it was too slapstick. Like, it was incongruous with the rest of the movie.
Nothing really in that middle chunk of the movie, without giving too much spoilers for like what happens in the sort of second half, which I think is largely not in any of the trailers.
Right.
But to me, that sort of middle chunk of the movie,
it's where it lags.
Where the movie, I think, lost me a little bit. I think once it goes into the real world, I think it loses a little bit of comic energy.
Well, because it can't decide whether it is the real world or a skewed version of the real world.
Right.
So part of the time, Barbie and Ken are interacting with characters who feel genuine, and Barbie and Ken are learning things about the way the real world operates that are real.
Right.
And then part of the time, they're interacting with these Mattel executives who are bizarre caricatures, slapstick, don't speak in a way that is the way normal people speak.
Right.
It feels like a completely separate movie from the rest of what we've seen.
So we talked a little bit about how hilarious Gosling is in this movie. I'm someone that thinks like he should just do more comedies. He's so naturally funny. I'm curious what you thought about Robbie in the movie, because I think that's actually a really, really challenging part. She has to balance both being sort of very self-aware and kind of having this winking sense of humor, while also there's a clear emotional arc she has to go on, and being able to sort of carry both of those two things at once is really challenging, and not having to have one thing kind of overpower the other.
I thought she's excellent in the film. It is, you're absolutely right. It's a movie that demands a great deal of her, and by the way, she has to look like Barbie, which is to some extent the ideal of a woman, or at least very close to what Hollywood and what corporate America would tell you is the ideal look of a woman. She has to do that at the same time as having a character who does have complexities to her, and over the course of the movie, those complexities grow tremendously. That's the whole point of her character, is to become more and more aware of how the world operates and Barbie's place in it, both her place and Barbie as a corporate thing. I think she does a really wonderful job, and in fact, one of the reasons I think Oppenheimer and Barbie have connected with audiences so much is that both of them are anchored by some really powerful performances, some actors at the top of their game who are creating characters that we can relate to, even though none of us are as smart as Robert Oppenheimer. None of us, frankly, are as beautiful as Barbie or as self-aware as either of those characters are. But we see things in them that we admire, and we see things in them that we can relate to. And as a result, we care about them almost instantly. I mean, one of the magic of both these movies is the way I was drawn into and rooting for these characters from the start. Admittedly, they're the title character in each film.
Right.
So
I mean,
of
we
course,
didn't even talk about Cillian Murphy in regards to Oppenheimer, which, I mean, just something I couldn't stop thinking about in the days since I've seen it is just his cheekbones and his eyes, these sort of like bright blue, like almost like husky eyes that he has, and just the way that
Nolan throws light on him at times, like to just cause him to pop off the screen in a really remarkable way. Yeah, he's for sure getting a Best Actor nomination.
He's such a subtle actor while also is able to sort of like hold so much complexity and sort of express that through the most kind of like subtle of body languages and sort of facial tics.
Well, and I thought both these movies are helped so much by the supporting cast. Like Josh Hartnett is great. We talked about Robert Downey Jr. already. Robert Downey Jr. is getting a Best Supporting Actor nomination, and it's a pity he's going to get one because it's going to mean that Josh Hartnett doesn't. And there are a couple other folks who were in the Oppenheimer film who I'm like, oh, that could be, and then I'm like, no, Downey Jr. is so great, you're going to get overshadowed by it. But it's a film that there are non-stop cameos is the wrong word for it, but non-stop appearances by recognizable faces who really do amazing work.
Both films really. I mean, the Barbie.
I was thinking to get to I think Kingsley Benadir, who is a background Ken, but puts a ton into him, and Simu Liu is in there, and some of these background Kens and background Barbies are just fabulous characters who embody. Look, I didn't play with Barbie very much growing up.
What?
But I remember the commercials. I remember the TV shows and the such, and they look so much like what they're supposed to look like. They act so much what they're supposed to look like. Again, these two films are nearly flawlessly executed.
Well, let's maybe wrap up with maybe the transition from Barbie as like a unique piece of corporate IP that It's rare. Who'd have thought we'd been having this kind of nuanced conversation about a Barbie movie a few years ago when this was announced. Coming out this weekend is the Haunted Mansion adaptation at Disney, which I would say is kind of in the opposite of this, where is something where I don't know. This just feels like cynical IP to me.
I mean, Disney's done a lot of this.
Yes.
Look, I thought Haunted Mansion, it's fine. I very much equate it to I'm gonna say it's fine. I equate it to the ride.
Okay.
So the ride, if you've been to Disney World, it's one of the older rides. It's sort of, there's a lot of nostalgia with it. You take it and you go, oh, that's okay. I can spend my time there. I'm not gonna have to wait in line a long time to get on it. No, it's not the quality of some of these other newer rides, but for what it is, it's okay, and I'm not sad that I went on it. I'm not making it a destination. I'm not making it something that I'm definitely going to go see or go experience. And the film is the same way. Like, if you go to the theater and Barbie and Oppenheimer are sold out, Mission Impossible is sold out, and you're like, what else am I going to see? Oh, Haunted Mansion's there. I think it's not terrible. I think Lakeith Stanfield, who plays the lead, is kind of in a different movie than everybody else, but he's a great actor.
That's kind of my biggest problem is this really feels like a weird mismatch of different people and different
He's
tones.
so serious, and the rest of them are so
right. I mean, you have this
slapstick.
This huge cast of like Lakeith Stanfield. You have Rosario Dawson, Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, Danny DeVito at one point.
Yeah, and Tiffany Haddish, Owen Wilson, and Danny DeVito are playing just weird characters.
Yes.
And then Lakeith Stanfield and Rosario Dawson are playing more serious characters. And it's like, I don't know, they don't fit together, and that's a problem for the film.
Even like the comedic styles of like Owen Wilson and Tiffany Haddish, it seems like they're in even like totally different comedies. Like not even there's the difference between like, Lakeith Stanfield in like dramatic movie and Danny DeVito in like an Always Sunny in Philadelphia sketch is what it basically felt like most of the time. But even among the more comedic characters, it feels like very different tones of comedy. And watching the movie, it just felt like this weird mesh of tones that never really worked for me, of like when it would try and swing and be earnestly sentimental, I think it didn't work for me. There's not any kind of sense of creepiness, which granted, this is a family movie. I'm not expecting it to be, there's another movie coming out this week called Talk to Me that's like one of the scariest things I've seen in a while.
Yeah, this isn't super scary and it isn't super funny.
But it's also not super heartfelt.
Right,
it like tries to be all three.
Yeah, maybe I'm being too nice saying it's fine. I think part of it was my expectations were so low that when I walked out of it, I was like, well, I didn't fall asleep.
Yes.
and I wasn't bored. So yay, success. But that's because it had a really low bar to clear.
Right. I think to me it just sort of feels
like... For you,
like...
it didn't clear that bar.
No, I think for me it felt... I walked out sort of feeling like, aside from the mishmash tone, which I keep sort of lamenting, like feeling like just an assembly of, hey, recognize this from the ride. Hey, recognize this from the ride. Hey, recognize this room from the ride.
I like the ride. I've been going to the ride for so many... I'm a big Disney fan.
Right.
So I've been going on that ride for so many years. Again, it's not a destination. It's usually okay, this is line's too long and our fast pass isn't good till here, and we're going to have lunch, and we got 15 minutes. Oh, Haunted Mansions, it's that kind of thing. But I recognize so much from the ride that I kind of enjoyed that about it. But is that enough to make you spend $15-20? Probably not.
Definitely not for me.
Apple Plus. Wait till it's on Apple Plus for free.
Sure. if even that, just you can find something else on Apple Plus.
Probably true, yeah.
Well, Jason, thank you for stopping by this week and discussing, and we'll have more great conversations in the future, I'm sure.
Absolutely.